Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I'll be your host. In today's episode, I'm kicking off something a little new, a series of conversations I've been wanting to explore for a long time, and it felt like the holiday season was the perfect time to do it. The next few episodes will focus on that curious and ancient intersection where the pursuit of spirituality overlaps with the pursuit of suffering, endurance, and pushing our limits. Why is it that sometimes the most meaningful moments in our lives show up when we're cold, tired, stretched thin, or way beyond our comfort zone? Is it also true for you that when you've had the least, struggled the most, and been the most uncomfortable, whether in a physical effort or just with life in general, that the good, the true, and the beautiful things shine the brightest in your memory? And what happens inside us when beauty, hardship, and the sacred all collide? To begin this journey, I'm joined by my good friend Reed Dunn, someone whose life, work, and story sit right inside this tension. We talk about the places where awe breaks in, what happens when we pursue solitude just a little too hard, and why community can be as spiritually electrifying as a mountain sunrise. It's the perfect conversation to set the tone for this new series, and I think it's going to hit in the best possible way. Let's dive in. Reed Dunn, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. We're going to do this, and I'm going to set this up with a little bit of a tea for you. You and I have known each other a really long time, really long time.
Long time.
through our wives, really. But I respect you. I think a lot about what you've done. And I think a lot of that will play into this conversation. But it's going to be a bit of a different one for my adventure audience that I think will hit on more on the meaning side of adventure, not just the activity. So appreciate you being here with me. And why don't we just start with a little bit of who is Reed Dunn?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure that out, but I do thank you for having me on. This is really, just even knowing this was coming has been such a fun kind of little way to investigate my own thoughts and kind of try to put words to things I haven't in a long time or haven't ever. So Reed Dunn I'm a pastor, a Presbyterian pastor just outside of New York City. And we live in Weehawken, New Jersey. Our church is in Union City. There are kind of all these little communities sprinkled along the Hudson River across from Midtown Manhattan. And we've been here for 3 years. Before that, I planted a church in Joplin, Missouri. So we went from super rural middle America to kind of, pretty really urban. And yeah, so that's kind of our arc. And I feel like I'm not an adventurer. I feel like I need to say that as soon as I possibly can, but I do love the outdoors and I love what I've discovered in the outdoors. And I think that I've always been, I think the balance between, I'll say spirituality. I think that's kind of a placeholder for a whole lot, but the balance and the kind of the interplay between spirituality and outdoor adventure, outdoor recreation, those things it's kind of been a main facet of a lot of my life, not all of it, but a lot of it. And so that's why if I need to justify myself being on here, that's probably what it is.
Well, I mean, you just described the everyday explorer. That's the little name that I've tagged. So why would you say, why would you couch that with I'm not an adventurer?
Yeah, I think we're all drawn to, like all of us that are into the outdoors are drawn to different things. And I think that, I had a lot of friends that were rock climbers. I had a lot of friends that were kayakers, and I taught kayaking for a couple of years in the summers. And, I think a lot of people are I think a lot of people in my circle were really pursuing adventure and hardship. And I probably, like, full disclosure, was pursuing beauty more than hardship. And so I tried like that balance ratio of like most beauty for least amount of hardship. So, I mean, I did, backpacking is how I never have enjoyed kind of like day hiking. I mean, I do love I love the simplicity. And I think this gets a little bit more deeper into the conversation, but the simplicity of backpacking, probably less from, so I think adventure, for a lot of people, a backpacking trip is adventurous. I think for a mountaineer, a backpacker is kind of a joke, right? Or not a joke, but like, that's what
Not
they
as
do
hard.
where they're going.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I definitely would count myself as an everydayer. I'm not some glowing example of something that no one else can do, for sure.
Well, so you're just alluding to this a second ago, but
Yeah.
where did all of that start? Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what getting outside looked like.
Yeah, so I grew up in rural Arkansas in what Arkansans would call kind of the river mountains. So like the line between the Ozark Mountains and the Ouachita Mountains, there's the Arkansas River like cut a bunch of mountains, including Mount Magazine. I grew up at the foot of Mount Magazine, which is the highest mountain in Arkansas, and that just imprinted on me. You could watch the seasons change on it. You could see if there ever snowed, it would snow there first. So I think that was always there. When I was 8 years old, my family drove to Colorado, to middle of nowhere Colorado, Southwest Colorado, not like the Front Range and all that. Lake City's the town, and we went there when I was 8 years old. It was like 1981 or something like that. It was way long ago, and they just fell in love with this town. And from 8 years old until 18, basically, I mean, high school got kind of weird because of schedules. We would take a camper up to Lake City, Colorado, and we'd spend 2 weeks in Lake City. And it wasn't, I mean, I climbed a 14 or two in that era of my life. I rented a mountain bike, or maybe took my mountain bike and rode it up into the high country a little bit. Mostly though, I was with my parents. We weren't fly fishermen, which is really what you do in that town. We weren't peak bagger types. There were like 4 or 5 14ers. One has been demoted recently, which is a real sad day. But anyway,
Wow.
But yeah, so there were 5 at the time. There were 5 14ers. So we didn't do a lot of that. It was honestly just kind of being around the Aspens, outside of Arkansas weather in the summer. So it really was kind of pursuing beauty for me from that standpoint. And then when I got my first, I got a Jeep in high school and spent every weekend I could just kind of by myself on Mount Magazine on old logging roads that were shut down, that I'd, kind of troll over in my Jeep. And so that, I think that really sealed, as far as getting older, that sealed. And particularly, I would say, being by myself in the outdoors. I was in a town I didn't want to be in. None of my friends wanted to do that. They wanted to, they were more sporty than that. And so I just kind of spent my whole high school life in the Ozark, I guess the Ozark Mountains or the Arkansas Mountains, by myself in my Jeep or whatever, my mountain bike. So that was kind of where it got started, for sure. And I would say,
go ahead.
First backpacking trip, my parents knew my love of that. And they gave, for graduation, high school graduation, they gave me a guided backpacking trip. And that kind of like started the bug of that, which really became kind of my thing for, 20 years. So
where was that to?
That was to outside of Vail. It was in Colorado. I think the Holy Cross Wilderness is the name of the place we were. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Still one of the prettiest places I've ever been, for sure.
How did your parents find Lake City from Arkansas? Because I mean, I've been to that part of Colorado. Lake City does not like stand out. It's not close to the interstate or anything like that.
Yeah, and it did less then. Like now, in the summer, it's basically like Texas North. I mean, there's a whole lot of people from outside that know about it now. I don't know how they found out about it. My parents read a book. I forget the guy that wrote it. He walked across America, and the title was Walk Across America, creative. And he wintered in Lake City and just described his experience wintering in this town. And my parents were reading it. We're just like, that's amazing. That sounds like a great place. And so we went there, and that was it. We went there every summer after. It's crazy. And I went to school in Colorado my freshman year, near there in Gunnison, Colorado. Worked at a camp for 2 kind of summers/years in Lake City. Like, it just became a focal point in my life for a really long time.
You went to school in Colorado for a year?
I did.
I've known you for like almost 3 decades. I did not know that.
No, my wife has to okay, how did it all work? Because I just bounced between Colorado and in Arkansas throughout college. So yeah, I enrolled in classes. I skied 5 days a week at Crested Butte. I got really good at Frisbee. I didn't really go to class, which is why it was 1 year. So, oh well.
That's a pretty good year though.
It was a great year. I packed a lot in.
So that makes a ton of sense then, that would be a springboard to spending more time outside. Did you ever get your Jeep stuck or break anything?
Yeah, I had it leaned up against a tree one time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and luckily it wasn't leaned so much that I couldn't like somehow get it back straight. But I mean, yeah, like it was high centered one. I mean, but I was by myself, and there was one time I took a girl with me, and I was, and it was something I forget what. I think it was like a radiator problem. It wasn't something I could fix. It wasn't like a tree. It was something I could not fix. And we found someone to help us. And it was the two of us, me and the girl, and she's a cute girl, whatever. And I was like, hey, my Jeep's broken down. We flagged these guys down that were doing the same thing. And they just laughed. They're like, sure, it's broken down. Like, you just
yeah. So, convenient.
Yeah. So one time I took a girl or someone other than myself, and that time I had problems. So
that's really funny.
Anyway.
Well, hard to have a bad day when you're driving a Jeep through the mountains.
That's true. Indeed. Yeah. Yep.
So tell me a little bit more about the backpacking that you did through college and since then.
Yeah. So it started with Colorado, and then I started buying gear, kind of ran up a visa bill like crazy when I was, like every unwise college student does. It's probably the type of thing you're trying to get people not to do. Like in my day job, to be wise and patient. And so I hiked a lot in Arkansas. I hiked just various trails. Ozark Highlands Trail is the big trail. It goes through Arkansas. I hiked sections of it. I never hiked it. I never had the desire really, because it's pretty monotonous.
Where does that go? What are points?
Starts near Fort Smith. Lake Fort Smith is where it starts, and then it ends at the Buffalo River. If you know those two.
Oh yeah. It's monotonous though. Like scenery is the same.
There's not a lot of topology in Arkansas. I mean, there's a lot of topology. There's not a lot of elevation gain to kind of play with. So you're either when you're hiking in Arkansas, you are hiking up in the morning, in the early morning, mid morning, you're hiking down, you get to some kind of water source, you eat lunch, and then you walk up early afternoon and you walk down late afternoon, and then you camp. Like that's it every single day, every hiking trip I ever went on in Arkansas, probably. So I think that kind of like, I was like, yeah, if I'm going to through hike something, I'm not going to through hike that. I didn't end up through hiking anything, I don't think, for like totally, but I through hiked the Buffalo River Trail, which is a pretty small trail. That was I hiked up river for however many days, rented a canoe and a dry bag, put all my gear in a dry bag and floated back down. That was probably one of my favorite little kind of like multi-adventure. I don't know if that counts as adventure, but then, and I hiked in Colorado, some, not a lot, Southwest Colorado, back kind of that. I knew that area so well, Southwest Colorado, that I spent more time there. I spent a month on kind of doing an outdoor leadership program in Maine and New Hampshire, mostly on the Appalachian Trail. Or Appalachian Trail, I should say.
Yeah, gotta get that right.
I know. Yeah, it was my first time to ever be on that trail, and I did it in Maine and New Hampshire, so I've always called it the Appalachian Trail instead of the other place I spent a lot of time is the Smokies in there. So,
what organization was that you're doing with?
It's probably not together anymore. It's Pebble, P-E-B-O-L. It was basically a soft skill, so it's leadership. It's not hard skills like we did hard skills like calorie counting and emergency evacuations and stuff, but it was kind of a feeder for NOLS leaders at the time. It was more like wilderness education instead of just like, because I really wanted to go into outdoor education. That's what I wanted to do for a long time. And this is crazy. I met Paul Petzel when I was there. He was kind of the figurehead of that organization. It's not Petzel like the
headlamps.
It's not the same spelling. Yeah. Paul Petzold is the father of modern mountaineering. He was the first. I mean, his stories are the greatest stories. First person to do a double traverse of the Matterhorn in one day. He invented basically the lockstep, which any mountaineer knows, and anybody that's hiked a really big hill with a heavy pack, that lockstep where you lock your one leg and take a breath and all that, that's him. He worked with the 10th Mountain Division during, I think, World War II, and that's where he like kind of codified a lot of mountaineering skills that we use even today. It's crazy. He was like 85 or 88.
He was teaching this group that you were in?
He was like at the base camp, and he would like tell us stories the whole time.
Oh, still, that's incredible.
Crazy. So yeah, it was incredible. He is a huge person in the outdoor community. He's long past now for sure. But
so you were up around like the 100-mile wilderness in Maine, or
yeah, White Mountains more.
White Mountains, yeah.
The White Mountains. The whole thing was in the White Mountains. So like Mount Washington and all that. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't, especially that haven't spent any time on the East Coast, don't think of that whole mountain range up the East Coast as being really extreme. But as far as I know, the coldest recorded temperature on maybe it's the U.S., continental U.S., was on Mount Washington.
Where the worst straight winds ever recorded on planet Earth
were on Mount Washington.
And the hardest hiking I have ever done, and I've hiked desert in Arizona, Colorado mountains, Wind River Mountains, British Columbia. I haven't hiked everything, but I've hiked all over the country, and I have never hiked anything worse than a New Hampshire hiking trail. Even like the Appalachian Trail in New Hampshire. It's hand over hand. They wouldn't know a switchback if it hit them in the face. It's just like, you got to go up the hill.
Yeah.
Get up there. It's crazy. It is so extreme. It is shocking.
Well, and I've heard the weather, and it's like that in Colorado and a lot of other big mountains, but the weather changes fairly drastically. Yeah. So every year I read stories about people that get stranded or die, or they went up in shorts and it's snowing by the time they come down.
Yeah.
Or that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
Well, that's some legit experience.
Good. I was hoping I was waiting for you to say that, so I deserve.
Okay. So you feel a little bit better about yourself.
Okay, good. It'll be a good day.
In the Wind River is probably something offline I want to talk to you more about, because that's a place I want to spend a little bit of time too. But one of the things that comes up a lot when I talk to folks about being outside is, part of it is like the digital detox. You get outside of the overstimulation that we live in on a day-to-day basis, and the world opens up. The sky's big. You see the stars, and there's a sense of awness by being put in our place. Like, I'm this tiny little thing on this big planet, and the big planet is this tiny little thing in the rest of the universe. So the sense of awness, awe and wonder that comes from that. So of all the places that you have been outdoors, does one stand out as one that has been the most awe-inspiring?
The Wind Rivers is my favorite for sure. I've hiked it twice. I've hiked two sections of the wind, kind of the north section and the south section of the winds, and I have never seen anything like it. It is such an overlooked mountain range. It's real hard to get to. You don't drive through it, so you can't you don't see the winds and think, oh, I want to hike here. You have to know where you're going when you get there. Yeah, I think I would say that. I mean, I went my first hiking trip, and the first is always the best, right? I mean, I hiked. We woke up one day. We had kind of gotten there at night. We woke up the next morning, and just collapsed at camp that night. So tired, kind of dark. I mean, like spiritually, physically, mentally, whatever. Mm-hmm. And it woke up, and I could see 7 waterfalls from the opening of my tent. There was a frozen up above us that we didn't know was there, and then these 7 waterfalls fed into this lake that we were camped at, and I've never seen anything like it. Thank goodness I didn't take a picture, because it never ever, and that's kind of goes to the digital detox. Like, I used to never take a camera because I knew I was a bad photographer. And I knew I was a really good rememberer, and I was actually not a good, it expanded in my brain. Right. And that's gotten prettier every time I've thought of it. I don't want to know what it really looks like at this point. I know what I remember it as. And so for a long time, I never took a camera. It would have been a disposable camera. Like it wasn't back in, it was way long ago. But yeah, that's the prettiest. That's my favorite spot. I live in it in my head occasionally when I need it. So,
well, then we definitely need to talk more about that.
yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to probe a little bit was in moments like you just described, where you and I wasn't there, but I can actually, in my
Yeah.
images in my head, picture the tent opening,
Yep.
seeing the water and the trees, and I mean that's fairly incredible to have that image. But you experience it. So here's the question: moments like that, how have, whether it's this one or other ones put together, how has that shaped your understanding of your connection to God or to spirituality in general?
Yeah. And I'll say spirituality because I think that keeps it more generic. And I think generic is part of it. I think that I do believe in a God, but I think spirituality, I guess we do need to talk about God, whatever God. Spirituality is the act of connecting to that higher power. That is spirituality. That's why Christians, like I believe, obviously in a Christian God. I believe the Christian God is kind of the God. Like that's kind of I've kind of staked my life and work on that. At the same time, I fully accept that there are other forms of spirituality. Like spirituality it's not exclusive, even if we make exclusive claims about who God is or whatever. Spirituality is the act of transcending the human reality and coming into contact with the divine. And I think anybody can do that. I don't think you have to be, it doesn't matter who you are. I think we're at the place now where I think most of us like if you think a higher power created the world, then you can get in touch with that entity, I would say person, through nature. And I think that I think all of us, even if we don't believe that, I think most of us have the itch that there's got to be something more and there's got to be something bigger. And I think all of us in our like daily life function, even the most Christians, most of us probably function like secular humanists that kind of think that we're the apex being in the world. But I think all of us know, every human being down deep knows that there's an itch for something better, something bigger. And so I think that's probably the biggest drive we have that draws us into the outdoors is connecting with something that's transcendent, is really the word I guess I've been talking around. We want to connect with transcendence, something that transcends our small world, our small brain, our small impact, our small whatever we can, whatever our physical ability. We want to transcend that, and we want to come into contact with transcendence. So that's the spiritual act, is really doing that. And so I think that's why you have so many of the great spiritualists of whether Chinese poets or Christian monks or whoever, to David, right, in the Psalms. I think you have them in the wilderness dealing with hardship, because I think that's where we experience that. So that's kind of like, yeah, I think that's an important aspect of this.
That's so good. So I'm going to reiterate a couple things I just wrote down.
Yeah.
Spirituality is the act of transcending and connecting into contact with God and connecting with transcendence. So, I mean, that just like feels right in the way you describe that. But why is, in your words, why is nature the canvas that happens on maybe more regularly than going to a baseball game or some other venue?
Yeah, I think, and I think baseball players do it, with flow, and every athlete or every artist, they experience that. When I'm at a baseball game, I am not experiencing any flow. I'm having a great time, right? But I'm an observer, And I think that when we get into the wilderness, it's one of the most important, one of the easiest ways to become a participant. And I think that being a participant is kind of probably an important aspect of this kind of transcendent work. And so I think that that's one thing. I just think from the start, we're not watching someone else do something. And I think that we have to do it in order to be part of that story, get swept up into that work and momentum. I also think that that is a pure place to find it, right? I think that the wilderness is a place where you are just walloped in the face with transcendence that isn't human, right? And I think that's, I mean, like we live, like our back deck, we can see the skyline of New York City. I mean, there's transcendence there, right? It's beautiful. The most beautiful thing that happens on the skyline of New York City, we're looking east. The prettiest thing that happens, though, is when the sun sets behind us and the buildings light up with the sky colors, the sunset colors. So like even then, it's like, as hard as man can work, as hard as humankind can do our magnificent thing, the real beauty is when, the divine steps in and is like, yeah, but I'm going to make them all light up in colorful array.
My bear and watch this.
Right. Exactly. You think you did it good. Let me show you. Let me make it pretty for you now. So I do think that there's just something pure about it. There's something. Robert Service was one of my favorite poets. He was a poet like along the lines of Jack London. He wrote during the gold rush in the Yukon, and he wrote The Cremation of Sam McGee, which is a really famous poem. But he has another poem called The Call of the Wild, and he says, "Have you seen God in his splendor, or heard the text that nature renders? You'll never hear it from the family pew." And I think that I think it just, it's just really nice to see God in his splendor. And I think that nature does that more immediately. And I mean, like, not mediated, right? Like, it's not mediated through flow. It's not mediated through meditation. You can do yoga. You can do all kinds of things to do spiritual work, which is the work of transcending to connect with the transcendent. But all of them, other than nature, just kind of, there's a lot of work involved. And when you're in nature, you might round a corner and you're just walloped with it. So that's the immediacy.
Yeah, I like that. There's no medium to get to it, and we have to be a participant. I love that you pointed that out. And I, being totally honest, doing these interviews, I get to talk to some really cool people doing cool things, and I have to remind myself that it's their thing, right? I can't, I don't connect to what has been transcendent for them by just listening to the story. It's easy for me to do that because I find these so interesting, but I got to be real careful. And I'm kind of in the middle of that right now of saying I still have to pursue my own challenges. I still have to pursue my own expansion into these things and not just rest on somebody else's doing of it.
Well, and that's a thing right now with like all the through hiking videos and stuff. Like you can get on and feel like you hiked the Pacific Crest Trail really easily. You can, the ups and the downs and the John Muir during the snow, the Cascades during the fall, whatever. You can feel it, and you're not feeling it. You're not doing it. You're not participating. So yeah, I think that's just becoming more of a problem. It's like ubiquitous problem in our age, isn't it?
Well, and that's certainly overlays pretty closely to maybe how many people interact with institutional church, right? That if we're not a participant in the connection with the transcendent, it's just religion. It's just a thing to do. And there's no transcendence through that. So, I mean, what are your thoughts being on the side of the institution and that being where you spend your days? What do you see in how people are making that connection?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, you said it so well. I think that religion, there's nothing wrong with the religion. Religion is the form that our spirituality takes. And I think that, and I'm a firm believer that religion provides some things that naked spirituality doesn't, right? Like I used to say when, when I was spending more time in the outdoors, trying to spend more time in the outdoors, like I can go see a mountain, and I can see, like, going to a mountain range and spending a week there. It's like going to an art gallery of God. But it's also nice to sit down with the artist, right? It's also nice to hear their intent and hear their personal opinions, and what would they really say if they could speak. And like, kind of those personal questions don't always get answered in naked spirituality. And so you just get transcendence, and transcendence by itself is not good. That there's nothing lonelier than a fully transcendent divine being. Within Christian technical language, we believe in a God that is both transcendent and immanent. And so if all you have is transcendent, you're not going to have someone there with you holding your hand when you've lost a child, right? That's not, you don't go to the mountain range. You might work out your problems there, but you're working out your problems by yourself. And so I'm a firm believer in religion. I love religion. It's how we can hear from God. But religion is just a form. And so my job in my religious work is to bring people into spirituality through religion, right? And so to use the form that we're given through the Bible and doctrine, blah blah blah, to use that form in order to get people to do that very same thing, which is to transcend in order to meet transcendence, to meet someone different than themselves. And my tradition's temptation is to open the Bible to learn something. And if that's what you're doing, that's religion. If you open your Bible to meet someone, that's spirituality. And so but you need both. I think it's important to have both. I really do. In my religious work, I don't just do group trips into the mountains, right? I do believe in the religious order of the world, but it's not the only thing either.
Can someone meet and communicate with God outside of the framework of religion?
What was the question? Is that what you asked?
Can someone?
Oh, can they? Yeah, I mean, I think so. Generically, yeah, I think you can. I mean, I'm speak not as a Presbyterian, but I think, yeah, for sure. Even outside of that, even as a Presbyterian, I think that God, I believe God made the world, and I believe that God expressed himself through the world. I mean, there's so many Psalms that talk about, in fact, all ancient wisdom. If you ever read the book of Job or the book of Proverbs, you're like, why are they talking about nature so much? It's because the ancient understanding of wisdom was God was revealing himself through the patterns in nature. That's ancient wisdom. That's ancient Hebrew wisdom. We think of wisdom as give me answers, right? When I ask for wisdom on taking a job, I'm not asking for God to reveal himself through the patterns of the created order. I'm asking for God to write something on the wall. I need to take this job. We want answers. But I think that more patient societies were very comfortable looking at the way that the tides worked and the way that the rivers flowed and the way that the wind was, and drawing upon that to kind of work out their life. And I think that's we believe. I think that even as a Christian, I believe that that's real and important. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think it's a good. We can step into this kind of next thought that I have also around this idea of pursuing transcendence, connection with a higher power through nature and creation. But a lot of times in these conversations, I talk to folks, and the things that they really highlight and remember about the things that they've done were the people that they were around, whether it was their crew that helped them run 135 miles, or the people that they went backpacking with, or the person that was right there alongside as they were. One guy rode an elliptical machine across the United States. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those. It's like an elliptical machine, but it has wheels. So it's,
oh, wow.
And he went from coast to coast.
Wow.
But all that to say that there's a sense that I get that the community provides purpose to the adventure itself. And I interviewed a mountain climber who's also trained as a psychologist. That was a fascinating combo.
My
But
goodness.
he has 5 elements of adventure. One of the key elements, and he would say it's not truly adventure without it, is companionship. That
Mm,
if you're just doing a thing that is truly solo, it's a selfish venture. It's not truly adventure. But and he uses the example of somebody that's climbing a mountain by themselves can still be on adventure, but there are people behind the scenes that were supporting them, that helped him train, that helped
mm.
organize a home so that they could go do that thing. That's still a community around a pursuit of adventure. But I guess the question for you is how has that looked for you? How have you seen shared outdoor experiences connecting people together, not only with themselves, but again, with the sacred through
Mhm.
these pursuits?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the majority is kind of sad, but the majority of my outdoor adventure was solo, and I think, I mean, and I don't mean that like in a dark way. Like I think I was running from a lot,
Interesting.
and so I think I would, in other words, I would never counter what that psychologist said. I'd be like, yep, that's exactly right. Like
Hmm.
it wasn't a healthy thing in me that I was out there by myself a lot. And so when I look back on my I mean, in my 20s, which is when I did, the majority of like, it's when I mean, you can't be a backpacker a lot and have a real job, right? Or have a normal job. You could be, I'm not that,
Right.
not that high earning person to go away for a month. So so I think that I was a really I went to the woods as a therapist, and I think that I wanted to do that alone, and I think I usually came out as bad off or worse than I usually went in. And so I kind of,
Interesting.
in some ways, I have a little bit of a dark relationship and dark memories of that time period because of that. And to your point, what really changed that is, so I had done all this backpacking all through, starting at 18, all the way through basically until I was 30, and lots of trips and too many to count. And then kind of hunkered down and had, we had babies and all that. And then got when my oldest daughter was 8 years old, which was too early to try this, or I should have done it differently. We went on our first backpacking trip to the Smoky Mountains, and I mean, it was precious. We like walked, every 200 yards we had to like take a break, take a snack break, whatever. And I didn't have her carrying much. It was like her pillow and her stuffed animal, but that was still a whole lot. She's tiny, as you know. Um, and so we just kind of munched our way up, one of the little trails in the Smoky Mountains. And I may have been a little bit too young size wise for her to do that, but I was so excited. I just waited, for so long. And there's worst weather. It was like spring break in the Smokies, as you know, I'm sure, I always end up in the Smokies at spring break and always end up in bad weather every single time I've done it. And I mean, it was brutal. And we just sat in our tent, and I think we were reading through one of the Narnia books. I think it's Prince Caspian, and that's what we did. And it was one of my favorite hiking trips of my whole life up to that point. And it was like I spent the whole time in the tent, like we didn't hike the second day. We like just hiked in, spent a day sitting in a tent, torrential rain, and then hiked out. And it was marvelous. And so there's that. And I think as my daughters got older, we took them to the Wind Rivers. We've done other trips with them, and that's when I actually I would say my heart opened up to the people around me, to bring them into this and let them see things, because that's really what you're doing. You're experiencing things with people, and watching their experiences and their life change. You're interacting with them and hearing their take on things, and watching them sacrifice, and it was the first time I had like really fun outdoor stories that we can all sit around and laugh at. Like all my stories are by myself that I can tell you about, whatever. And it was just me. And now, like sending one of our kids off to go to the bathroom, it just becomes this hilarious moment, and just those are the things that really matter. And so I couldn't agree more that's really important for sure.
Yeah, I mean, what you described, it sounds like it really opened up your experience to what nature had to provide to you, as if the earlier experiences were kind of handicapped.
Yeah.
You were getting something out of them, but with, one arm tied behind your back,
Yeah, for
so to
sure.
speak. So it opened your experience up. Do you see a path for adventure in community as and maybe with nature as the canvas, but as a path to some, I don't want to say easier, but another way to connect with the sacred through that, not just connecting with each other and having a bigger experience, but how does that help us connect with the sacred?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I would say it is, like in the church, let me say this, in the church, there's like, I kind of think of there being four means of grace. And, you have like, obviously the word, and you have the sacrament, and you have prayer, but the fourth is just people, is fellowship. And that just comes from Acts chapter 2. But I think that people are how we see God. We see God through each other. And I think that's why, that's an important. So yeah, I think being out there with other people is just another element of that experience of transcending ourselves, because that's really all it is. I mean, we are out in the woods to transcend, to come into contact with the transcendent, and we're just out there to pull ourselves out of our own heads, really. And the woods will not pull you out of your own head, I think, by itself. I think challenge will. I think if you're doing something huge and it rips you out of your own head and you have to be part of this extreme experience. I've never done that. I've like avoided that stuff like crazy. I'm not gonna jump or whatever wingsuit. I'm not gonna do something so extreme I'm ripped out of my own head. But sitting around laughing with my family in the woods it rips me out of my own head. So for sure, I think that's an aspect of the same work, really.
So it's community in the midst of beauty, in the midst of something that is big and beautiful. Can you think of some other examples where it's not the woods, it's not nature, but it's still some element of beauty that can create a similar outcome?
Yeah, I think, I mean, like living here, it's real easy just to talk about going to the museums, but we do. I mean, that's why we live here, is because we love to do that. And I'm always wanting, it's so silly, like I'm always wanting to go by myself. I have this drive to like, it's like this mistake I keep reliving, that I think for it to be meaningful, I have to be by myself. And it's why I think God gave me a wife that just horned in on everything I ever wanted to do and like wouldn't let me be by myself. And I think that I'm thankful for that. So yeah, like I think there's a lot of times where I'm like, oh, I want to do this by myself, and I end up not, and I wait until she can go, whatever. And I'm kind of like down about it. I wouldn't tell her, but hopefully she doesn't listen to your podcast. But I'm bummed to go with me. And then when I'm there, I'm with the person that I love, seeing the things that are beautiful, right? I just think that I think a lot of my impulses to be by myself in those beautiful places and have those kind of solitary experiences is just not the best part of me. It's not the part of me that I like the best. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. I want to highlight your book. You just recently released a book. Megan and I have read through it, and I think it also highlights, or maybe there's some background there that you can speak into from the things you researched and talk about. But the book is called "When You Don't Have Words, Praying the Psalms," and so it's really an exercise of walking people through the ancient path of praying the Psalms. And for somebody that's been around church for a while, like I've read the Psalms off and on, never really paid a whole lot of attention to the details or the ancient part of it. So your book highlighted a lot of things that I had never really thought about around the framework of the Psalms. But how do you see the language of the Psalms resonating with outdoor experiences. So, trail, ocean, mountain overlook, but a lot of them, again, you would know better than I would, but many of them speak to the expansiveness of the world and God's place in it. But tell people a little bit about, or speak into that a little bit from what you wrote.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say if I had to boil the Psalms down to two causes, one is there's a lot of crap happening around me and I don't like it. That's a lot of them. I'll say that's the
Theme
majority.
number one.
That's number one by a strong margin. And the other one is the beauty of nature in a lot of sense. I mean, I think there's some other things that create Psalms, but those are two of the biggest. Psalm 104, if you're just kind of wanting to like dabble in this, Psalm 104 is it is just a praise of God through nature, and it even follows kind of the seasons and rhythms, and there's a rhythm to it that's really cool. I think in Psalm 104 is a good example of this. The thing I always come back to is what I found writing my book is how much their worldview was at odds with our worldview, our materialistic, kind of positivistic, not positive, but like positivistic, like scientific worldview, where we kind of know the answers to every question before we ask it, kind of all that stuff. I think that they lived in a world that was mystical. And Psalm 104, I think it's 104, has one of my favorite concepts, which is that God stops the ocean, that he set a line that it cannot cross. It's talking about the tides, right? But when you're an Old Testament Hebrew, you don't have a good water story. There is not a good water story in the Old Testament. The Old Testament in the Hebrew Bible is literally like, if there's a water situation, there's something bad, whether it's Noah's
bad.
right, or Jonah getting swallowed by the whale. Like, they were a land-dwelling people. They weren't the Phoenicians, and they were comfortable on land. The ancient Hebrews were. They were on one of the major land routes in the ancient world, and so they were land dwellers. And I love that idea that God set a boundary for the water that it cannot pass, because like, if you're afraid, and they're not afraid of water, but like if they were kind of like water was an issue, if you're standing at the beach, like, we know why the tide stops every however many hours. I don't know. We should have researched that. But like, we know that there's like the moon is involved. Like, even my lack of scientific knowledge, like, I know the moon's up there doing something, right? And I know that whatever. I know it's not going to keep going. But if you live in a world that is full of mystery, you believe that God stopped the water from coming up. And if the water didn't, it would keep coming and keep creeping and just wash out your family and your home and all the things you loved. And I that, to me, when I see especially the Psalms interacting with nature, it's a beauty that I think we have completely lost. There's a Psalm 29 is another one that's a great mystery, or a great nature psalm, and it, in our English translation, which I'm not sure is fully correct, but it says that the Lord makes the deer give birth. And you're just like, I mean, do I really believe that, or do I just think that they have a gestation period? And it goes on that another one says that the lions roar for their food and seek their hand from God. That's back to Psalm 104. There's in Psalm, one of the 140s, I forget which one, where God keeps the ice, for the sleet and the hail. Like, he keeps it in storage somewhere. It's just living in a world that has mystery. And I think we've lost that. I think that's what nature gives us, because I think there are things in nature that we can't explain, even though our minds run really fast to try to explain it. And science tries its best, but even science probably comes short. Science doesn't explain beauty. Science can explain how things got here, but it can't explain why things are pretty, why they connect to us. And I think that the Hebrew Bible and the Psalms in particular, like, they functioned in a world where they didn't have to see those two at odds with each other, whether this was, man or nature or human or divine. They didn't live in that kind of, is it bifurcated world or bifurcated? Yeah. They didn't live in that. They lived in a world where everything was divine, and they were just kind of floating through it. And I think that a lot of my own interaction with the Psalms is trying to get back to that worldview. I'm not like chucking science, right? I'm still going to go take medicine if I'm sick, but living in a world that has mystery, that isn't just everything figured out before we even ask a question. I think that's the biggest thing that my research brought me toe to toe with. And I think I have a chapter or two that kind of bumps up against that in that book, about just living as if God is an active participant in life. That's not my MO typically. I have to work to get to there. So
yeah, that's really helpful. Living in and growing up in, the modern enlightened world that you and I both did, college educations and thinking brains, and I definitely feel the pull to need to explain everything before believing it. And what you just said is something I've been trying to, and this is so unnatural to me, is to accept and lean into the mystery of the world, the mystery of how things exist, that I don't have all the answers, and I need to be okay with that. And so I've never thought of the Psalms as a way to connect with that. So that's a really helpful description. And I would imagine through your research with that, you maybe came to a better understanding of David, being somebody that wrote a lot of them from what we know. And he spent a lot of his times in caves and hillsides and fleeing danger. And I was mentioning this to you earlier, that the Amazon Prime has The House of David, which is a new series on the life of David. It was great. I expected it to be really bad at all levels. And
not that you're a cynic, but
yeah, I wear the cynic cloak extremely well, extremely easily. But it was so good at illuminating the humanity that existed, even if it was thousands of years ago, that the things that they lived through and that he experienced, different canvas than ours, but very similar. So what I want to make a comparison here is, and it may be a little bit of a stretch, but many of the people that I've interviewed have pushed themselves into extreme situations. David was doing it either to save his life or to do his job as a shepherd or whatever, but many of us today that are doing hard things are choosing those hard things. But they also describe, and I want you to see if there is any connection here with David, but they also describe how not only did they survive those things, but they felt most alive in that moment, most alive in the moment of fear, of danger, where they weren't sure how they were going to take their next step or what the outcome was going to be. And the interesting thing to me also is that as soon as that experience is over, it's a matter of minutes and they're planning the next one. It's not that, oh, I should never do that again. I've never felt more alive and I need more of that. So is there anything that we can learn from David's experience in the wild places that opens us up more to being fully human, fully alive, and fully in connection with our higher power that is over all of humanity?
Yeah, I think, man, that's an interesting question. And I just have to say, like, for the other everydayers out there that hear, like, I don't know, the few times I've been like, I don't know how I got through that, my first thought is I never want to do that again. Like, if I can be an apologist for, like, the quiet ones, right? The hobbits.
There's all kinds.
There are. I now find God more through balance than extremity. But
here's the thing too, Reed, that I kind of play around with this idea a little bit, is that as an animal species, I really don't believe that we do anything unless there's truly a reward, a carrot that brings us back. Otherwise, we just won't do it. We lose interest. So I think the carrot for you, or what you're describing, has a different resulting or a different outcome to get to that fully aliveness and connection or transcendence, as you were describing earlier. For other people, it's to the repeating of the thing that they just finished that was really hard. So it may be the same process.
But I do think that, to the real question, like, I think certain people have an appetite, and I think it appeals, like you're saying, it appeals to certain people that when you have that experience on the very edge of reality, I mean, all you've done is come into, you've bumped up against the edge of what humanity can do, what you as a single human can do, whatever limit. I mean, that's the whole point of going beyond limits, is that's the whole point of hardship, I think. I mean, even the most famous of the early church monks, the early church the desert fathers, as they're called, Saint Simeon the Stylite, which stylite just means column. He lived for 37 years on a column. He wasn't up there because he thought, if I'm 20 feet up in the air, I'd get, closer to God. He wasn't an idiot, right? I mean, he was thinking that if I am in dealing with some kind of hardship, it's why all, that kind of monastic stereotype of whipping themselves and the asceticism and all that. It's why we're struggling so much to find God, is we don't understand asceticism. We don't understand telling ourselves no. We don't understand hardship. And so even in my balanced, loving life, I do believe that we find God more in hardship than and we're working really hard to pad our own cell nowadays and make it as comfy as we possibly can. We don't tell ourselves the thing, we don't, living in the no. All of our saints were saints because they told themselves no somehow or another. And I think that these extreme people that you have on your show, they're pushing themselves to the very edge because that's where they find the no. I think the no, and not with a K, but with an N, right? I think that if you live through that, then you have a lease on life. All of your yeses mean more, right? If you lived through a major no. And if the world, I'm never going to intentionally put myself in a situation where the world is telling me no as far as keeping on living. I'm not there, but there are people that's where they get it. But I'm working to tell myself no in other ways and strip myself bare in other ways. But that's all we're doing. We're stripping ourselves bare because we're all sick down deep. We're all sick of what the human capacity is. We want the God capacity. We don't want the human. We know down deep that the human capacity isn't the only capacity out there. And so we want to jump the divide, and we want to get over there to the place where we've gone past the limit of humanity. And again, that doesn't have to be Everest or wingsuits. It can totally be simply telling yourself no, with Amazon, for crying out loud, or telling yourself no with luxury, or telling yourself, like, the limitations are really where we find God. And I think in the spiritual discipline of limitation, that's really where we find God. And so you can find that, through like life limitation, or just kind of like your own kind of spiritual discipline of limitation. But I think limitation is a really important facet in spirituality.
That is so well put, and connects and highlights so many different things in my brain. But the fact that all of it is getting us to a no, and that no is really the beginning of the possibility of transcending and connecting with God, that makes so much sense, and why so much of that is lost in our comfortable, excessive modern world.
Yep.
So hard to find that. And I'm really glad you went to the Desert Fathers and Mothers, and I don't know a whole lot about that time period, but what else do we have to learn from them and some of the extreme situations that they put themselves in pursuit of, was it transcendence, or was it finding God, or
yeah, definitely trying to find God. So I think what they did, and I have a quick history of them in the book because they influenced me so much. And like, I have to say, academically, I've not chucked everything and walked out into the, for ages to be with God by myself in a cave.
Sat on a column for 30 years.
I haven't yet. I'm still young, but the singular pursuit of them of willing, I mean, because they didn't have, Instagram, right? But they did have like they, and this, I have this in the book, that they were at a moment when Christianity had become legal and it was becoming the state, quickly becoming the state religion, and you could get a leg up in society by being Christian at that point.
What time frame is this?
400s
Okay.
BC or AD, sorry, AD, like 300s to 400s. It was in Alexandria is kind of where this movement began. They went out mostly into the upper wilderness of Egypt and then Palestine and other places as well. But it started in Egypt. And so I forget, 345 maybe is when Christianity became legal or something like that. I can't remember exactly. Maybe 415 is when it became a state religion. So it's kind of straddled that. Those numbers are super loose. I don't know. But so they just were sick of the ease. And I think that's where like we can all understand that. They were sick of the easy. And so they chose the hard. And I think that because there was a time, right, where if you were a Christian, I mean, you were going to have to stand against a civil magistrate or coworkers, or, I don't mean coworkers just like, oh, the guy at the, like, I mean, if you were in the Black Sea and if you were a fisherman in the Black Sea and you were unwilling to burn incense towards the God that they all believed managed the water in the Black Sea, do you think any of those other guys are going to get on a boat with you? Right. I mean, that was a very real problem, especially in First Peter is written to people in that area. That was a real problem, is like, I don't want to burn incense to Poseidon or whoever they would have thought managed the water, the Black Sea. Well, dude, I'm not getting a boat with you. We're not getting on a boat with a guy that won't burn that incense. And so they were being ostracized for hundreds of years. All of a sudden it's gone. And so now, and I think this is also a negative. So I don't think that these guys are always positive expressions, but they kind of sought out their own their exile. They exiled themselves. They really, and they overdid it. I mean, I don't think all their practices are great practices, but I do think that they were willing to say no to the way culture was going. And I admire them a whole lot for that. Sure.
And no, for the sake of a higher connection.
Yeah, they saw all of the luxury, the spiritual luxury of society as a problem. And I think, today, I think we struggle with this because we live, me in New York less so, but like we've lived in Christendom for a really long time as Christians in America. And we've always thought that was a good thing, or not all of us, but I mean, right? And when we start to lose that, I'm starting to speak to Christians here, but when we lose that, we try to regain it, that we think that that's going to be our answer, is to regain the religious power or the power over culture, blah, blah, blah. And I love those monks because they were like, cultural power for the faith is a problem to be solved. It's not an asset. And so when they saw culture turn towards Christianity, they were like, I am out. That is not going to reap benefit. That's going to reap poison. And literally they were right. I mean, I don't think they were right in everything, but you go, you follow Constantine, you end up with the Holy Roman Empire. I think they proved to be a little bit more right and they were crazy. Don't be like, oh, I found my new guy. They were crazy. They had really bad theology. They were all perfectionists. They all believed that you had to be perfect or worked towards perfection. They didn't understand the gospel, if I can speak kind of, in-house for a second. They didn't understand Jesus and his work very well. So they had major problems. But I love them for their focus, their willingness to say no, and to let go of cultural power that faith that they were headed towards, and be in the outskirts again. I love that. I think that's
and if I could take that and apply it in these adventure conversations also, those are chosen activities, very similar to how the Desert Fathers and Mothers chose to find the extreme, remove themselves from the culture, find the extreme, and in pursuit of connecting with something more transcendent, something higher. I think that overlays perfectly to what I hear people describing back to why they do these things over and over again. Without using the same words, I think the drive is coming from a similar place. So that was really helpful.
That's cool. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm curious how much that would overlap. I'm glad that it is.
Yeah. So, Reed, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I think as the more you talk, the more questions I was coming up with. So we probably could sit here for another 6 hours and go through this stuff. Maybe we should get out to the winds and just backpack for a few days and carry the conversation.
That would be a good conversation.
Yeah. So where can people find your book?
Anywhere,
buy
Amazon,
a few copies.
Whatever. Yeah, just it's out there. So yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on, Josh. It's so full circle to get to do this, and
yeah,
it means a lot. I love what you're doing. I think it's great for people to hear normal people talk about extraordinary things is really cool work you're doing. So
I'm going to steal what you just said and use it because that was a really good description. Normal people doing extraordinary things. That's the everyday explorer. Those are the people that I'm talking to. And to tie that back into my day job as a financial advisor and financial planner around people that do have wealth and do have comfort and do have complexities that come with that, I want people to live their great life right now. Yep. That building a bigger bucket for the sake of having a bigger bucket is an empty pursuit. But if it can be on purpose and we can live right now, and I'm talking to myself too, like I get so easily into a groove that I think part of why I do this is these conversations like are kicking my tail every single time I have them, right? Keep going. Don't just get comfortable. Don't just get status quo. And so I think that is a great description of the folks that have added to the content on this podcast. So Reed, you've added a ton of great content, and we'll see where it goes.
All right. Take care, man. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the On Adventure podcast. Be on the lookout for another episode dropping in a couple weeks. And be sure to go to our YouTube page and subscribe and follow us there, as well as on all the socials from Facebook to Instagram and LinkedIn. Until our next episode, I hope you stay safe and stay on adventure.